Welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban, and I am very glad to have all of you here on the show. The show is airing live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and Twitch, groups and pages. And of course, you can share it with your friends, as well as you can comment. And I will be able to look at and display your comments and questions as we go about our theme today. And of course, you are very welcome to subscribe to the channel, to like my Facebook page, and to do all those things, including subscribing to my Patreon page on patreon.com/David Orban that allows you to reward me and my team for the hard work that we put in creating this, as well as all the other content that I very happily put out. And this reward is an opportunity to get in touch. Patreon subscribers get exclusive content, all kinds of perks, and establish the kind of more direct relationship that we all need and we all like. Today's guest is Lorenzo Vallecchi. Lorenzo is an expert of renewable energies and of Bitcoin, and he recently published an article, an essay, almost a book, given how long it is, on Medium entitled Bitcoin and the Energy in the Next 50 Years. And I have to tell you, when I read the first sentence, I said, okay, I must invite Lorenzo on Searching for the Question Live, because it very, very strongly resonated with me. Let me read it to you. With the petrodollar fading, Bitcoin and renewable energy can integrate in an internet of networks, a new, more resilient, functionally unified energy monetary system. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. And here we are with Lorenzo. Welcome to Searching for the Question Live.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Before we go into the substance of our conversation today, I always like to ask my guests to tell a little bit about themselves, their path, their trajectory. So first of all, where are you physically today, and how are things going with the pandemic?
I'm in Rome right now. I live in Rome, so that's where I am based and where I have been, more or less locked in for the last year and a half, more or less, or year and a bit, more or less, like anybody else in their place of residence. So that's where I am. And, actually, we're not, here in Rome, in the Lazio region where Rome is, actually things are not as bad as in other regions here in Italy. But of course, we're still not out of this situation yet, not out of the woods.
Have you had any notice of when you would be vaccinated?
No idea. My mother, she's 88. She's going to be vaccinated next week. So I figure, before they arrive to people my age, our age, is going to be probably a few months.
Yeah. And have you adapted easily, or were you traveling a lot before in 2019, let's say?
Not that much, actually. I was working. I was traveling a bit, but I can't say I was traveling a lot. So actually, the transition was not that hard for me, And as a journalist, right now, and a consultant, which is what I do. You can meet with people, more or less anytime, anywhere, virtually, like we're doing now, right? So, in that sense, we're privileged and we're lucky compared to a lot of other people. So.
And a lot of the people who you would want to talk to may have said, oh, well, why don't you come? Let's have a coffee and then we can talk about it. And sometimes that was a pleasure. Oftentimes it was more like a chore. And now you can tell them, let's have a Zoom call and everyone understands. Even those who were reluctant in embracing the digital tools, they are now proficient. So that is certainly a very positive evolution.
Right. I mean, I've never been as productive as I've been in this last, period. I think, I mean, as bad as it is in many different ways, in terms of the line of work, that we're in terms of being able to talk with people and bounce ideas off each other. It's nice to see each other in person, but still we can do a lot. And there's, as you say, a lot of time wasted, quote unquote, time in traveling has been obviously eliminated. So you take the good and the bad.
So in your background, as far as I was able to see through your writing, there are different threads, and one of them is around renewable energy, photovoltaics, especially. Yeah. How did you come to that?
Well, that was like it's been. I was a journalist. I worked for Bloomberg for a number of years, so I was doing financial, business type of stuff as a journalist. And then I decided to change, and I opened with a partner a renewable energy company. So took a bunch of courses, and I was of course I was working more on the marketing side, communication side, development side of the business, not so much on the technical side, because obviously you need engineers for that. But I did take a bunch of courses, so I also became reasonably proficient technically, and I've worked in the renewable energy as an entrepreneur, installing systems, consulting for about 10 years. And right now, for the last couple of years, I've been going back to my old line of work, combining journalism and consulting with renewable energy. So I put together those two kind of expertise, and I now write about renewable energy, and I'm a bit of an analyst in the renewable energy field, and I do consulting in the renewable energy field, where, of course, I use a lot of my journalist skills to help communicate what I'm trying to communicate.
And how did you discover, and do you remember when did you discover Bitcoin?
Kind of. It is related to renewable energy, in the sense that I had a couple of projects at the end of 2016. 2016, I was working in Egypt. We had already done a project, and we were embarking on a much larger project for us. We were a small company. We were embarking on this project, which it had to do with with biogas for this company that was producing. It was a food processing company, basically using a lot of agricultural products, and they had a lot of biomass that they wanted to use to produce biogas with it. And we were, working with them, and pretty much fairly suddenly for us, at the end of 2016, the Egyptian central bank decided to let the Egyptian pound float freely, more or less, meaning they devalued the currency. So more or less from one day to the next, the value of the Egyptian pound collapsed, and within a month, or less than a month, the Egyptian pound was worth 100%. Was actually basically it had lost. It had. The value of the Egyptian pound was cut in half, let's put it this way, against the dollar. So, of course, the client we're working with could not, go ahead anymore, because their revenues were in pounds, in Egyptian pounds, and they could not afford what they were trying to do anymore. So that was what happened in that instance. And then almost at the same time, again, towards the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, of course, Donald Trump was elected. And one of the first, I think, executive actions he took was to get the United States out of the nuclear treaty with Iran. And at the time, I was also working, in this case, as a consultant for a group of companies, and we won a tender in Iran to provide this a power line technology, so-called to monitor CO2 emissions. So we were using the existing light infrastructure of Tehran to install these monitors to monitor CO2 emissions, because Tehran is incredibly polluted city. It's a quite polluted city. So that was the other project I was involved at the time. And basically, all of a sudden, with the U.S. pulling out of the nuclear accord with Iran, nobody, wanted to or could, touch Iran in terms of sending money to Iran, in terms of commercial relationships with Iran, in terms of financial relationships with Iran. So those two projects that were fairly important for us suddenly collapsed. Now, because of macroeconomic and political reasons. At the time, I was not particularly aware of Bitcoin in the sense that I had heard the name, but I didn't really know what it was. But after these two events, as I came across articles about Bitcoin, things started to resonate with my own personal experience in terms of what it meant to have my work life, my business life impacted by those kind of decisions. Devaluation of a currency and a political leader deciding that you could not, use the dollar pretty much or the existing financial infrastructure to do work, even if that work was, good work in terms of trying to reduce pollution in a very polluted city. So those two events kind of impacted me personally. And as I came across Bitcoin, I'm naturally curious. So at a certain point, and around 2017, I started reading about it. I can't remember the exact moment, but I remember getting more and more into Bitcoin, and that's how it started. It resonated because of those two personal events. Let's put it this way. So, and then
And yeah, Bitcoin then is a rabbit hole. Once you discover it, you just keep falling, and there is seldom a bottom in sight. There is always more to naturally discover. So without pretending to be able to define either precisely in a technical sense or completely in all their facets. But let's summarize some aspects of Bitcoin as they regard the two maybe fundamental components that you highlighted, and just so that people can find it easily, here is your Medium homepage, and the article can be found on that link for our viewers. So let's talk about Bitcoin first as a store of value. It started a little more than 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and at the beginning, of course, it was just an experiment for geeks. And it really could have amounted to nothing, even though there were people very passionate about it even back then. But little by little, through a surprising resilience that allowed Bitcoin to recover from fairly damaging instances of superstructure collapse, which is important, in my opinion, to identify as not the collapse of the network of Bitcoin itself, which has never failed in more than 10 years, but eventual pieces of software, for example, MTGOX, one of the first exchanges that were themselves either vulnerable or fraudulent or just not able to proceed. So Bitcoin kept going to the point where today is worth more than 40,000 euro, $50,000. The Bitcoin network itself is worth more than $1 trillion. What does that mean? what can people who are more accustomed to looking at traditional money understand of the surprising resilience and staying power of Bitcoin, and the fact that people are starting to take it seriously?
Well, I guess one of the most important, if not the most important, features of Bitcoin is that it does not rely on a central entity. So it's by definition one of its main features is that it's a decentralized system. So there's nobody controlling it, and it works by consensus. So there are a multitude of people in the network, of nodes in the network that basically have to collaborate to decide what the state of the ledger, which is what Bitcoin in a sense is, what the state of the ledger is. So it's a distributed ledger, meaning a ledger where you record transactions. So people that exchange money through the network, and the network records all these transactions, and nobody's in control of the transaction in terms of allowing the transaction, in terms of deciding who can transact Bitcoin. And the network, as Bitcoin as a network, is a permissionless network, so anybody can participate. Nobody controls it, and there's a system whereby everybody has to reach consensus on what the state of the network is. And that consensus is reached through a process whereby energy is used, and whereby you have to demonstrate that you have used a certain amount of energy to create one of the blocks where Bitcoin and the transactions are recorded. And the fact that it's distributed, and the fact that nobody controls it, and there are no middlemen around or through it or in the middle of it deciding who can do what when, makes it radically different from traditional financial systems, where you always have middlemen between people transacting with each other. The only way
there is no CEO of Bitcoin deciding how many Bitcoin should be issued in a given month or quarter. There is no quantitative easing in the world of Bitcoin, where you can decide to stimulate the economy by putting in trillions of additional units of account, like it is happening with the dollar and the euro these days. So over the course of many years, obviously, people have been able to buy and sell Bitcoin. And it is this buying and selling that defines what the exchange rate is at any moment, and whether it goes up or down. And there are those who are who love reading the tea leaves of some kind of, in my opinion, superstitious analysis, and they call it technical analysis to give it a scientifically sounding name. In some respect, it is also a self-fulfilling prophecy, because, of course, if enough people are reading the tea leaves in the same way, then they will arrive to the same conclusions, and potentially they will altogether buy or altogether sell Bitcoin, and the exchange rate will go up or down correspondingly. But these are short-term effects. What is causing the average over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years for Bitcoin to have gone from one Bitcoin being $1 to today one Bitcoin being $50,000? That wasn't caused by any single decision to buy and sell. And yes, people may understand that it is a very different system from the system of fiat currency and central bank controlled currency. But Is it the case that they are concluding that indeed it is a superior system?
Yes, I think Bitcoin has proven itself to be different things for different people at different times. Bitcoin has different value propositions, and not all of them will necessarily realize themselves at the same time. It started as a peerless cash payment system, basically. So the equivalent of cash, but in an electronic kind of way, electronic cash. That was the initial definition. Although, in the white paper that Satoshi Nakamoto wrote, which started this whole thing, there were other uses that were talked about. And one of them was also, and in the other, writings that Satoshi Nakamoto did, there were other uses and functions that Bitcoin could play, and one of them is store of value. So the store of value function is the one that over the last few years has become the main reason for people to buy Bitcoin, because it's been defined as digital gold, and the reason why it has increased in value for since pretty much the day it was created is that it has demonstrated in a market environment, so not on a theoretical basis, but with people exchanging this asset, with people transacting, buying and selling, and also starting to buy and sell services with Bitcoin, although that is still a minority of the use that people do of Bitcoin. But by transacting with Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin as a store of value in a market environment, people basically decided that this asset, this instrument, had an intrinsic value for them, and the intrinsic value for them was based on the fact that it's again a permissionless currency, something that is extremely difficult and hard to confiscate. Meaning, it's very hard to come. I can come and or anybody, like an authority can come and confiscate your money or your gold, but it's very hard to confiscate your Bitcoin, because basically it's a bunch of numbers, or it's actually a bunch of words, a seed phrase that one can memorize, and that will unlock, basically the vault where the Bitcoin are virtually stored, so to speak. Unless you are tortured, there's no way that anybody can extract that information from you.
That is exactly what I am sharing right now. Some of our viewers also may be fans of XKCD, a wonderful internet comic. And you see here that a crypto nerd is happy that the encryption on his laptop is so strong, and no one will be able to decrypt it. And in the second part, what really happens is that there's a $5 wrench to beat the nerd in the head until he gives up the password. So we have to be somewhat careful on what actually the balance in attacker and defender in security is.
Yes, but you're right. On the grand scale of things, though, it's hard to confiscate. It's hard to censor. Again, because no single entity or person or institution has control on the network, and the network remains, the only at this point market where anybody can participate freely without constraints. That doesn't mean that the market is not regulated, because there are a lot of regulations right now
if I may, it is not Bitcoin that gets regulated, because those nation states that pretend to pass regulations on Bitcoin, what they achieve as the end result is weakening their own ability to enforce any law, because they are teaching people that they are powerless, because the regulations on Bitcoin by itself are hard to impossible to enforce. The
Yes.
regulations that you mentioned are at the interfaces. So, for
Yes.
example, if I want to use my credit card to buy Bitcoin, I must identify myself on the exchange with an ID or other means, a passport, a proof of residence, and so on. Similarly to how a bank needs to identify me when I open a bank account. And this is what is called the Know Your Customer, KYC regulation. The nation states exercise their control when you want to get out, when you want to get into the Bitcoin network, and then once again when you get out, because most of the nations today treat Bitcoin as an asset, and as a consequence, when you exchange Bitcoin for fiat money in the future, you must account for gains or the losses that you have had. And if you end up having had a gain in the transaction, you must pay capital gains taxes in your place of residence or wherever you pay taxes. And so back to the original question, all these features of being permissionless, of being decentralized, of being finite, which is maybe one feature that we didn't mention, over the course of the next 100 years, a little more, asymptotically, Bitcoin is trending to the maximum number that the algorithm is going to issue. And as a consequence, contrary to the actions of central bankers, it is impossible to inflate away the value of Bitcoin, as it is a finite number. And then, as we said, it is uncensorable and extremely easy to transport. There are hundreds of millions of refugees in the world today, and their first preoccupation is not Bitcoin for sure, but if and when Bitcoin becomes universal, any of us will be able to travel when we want to or against our will, but still move around in the world with our wealth attached to Bitcoin. So all of these things seem to have led to a consensus in the people using Bitcoin and making decisions around Bitcoin every day, that indeed it is a more trustworthy store of value than not gold, for example, or let alone stacks of banknotes or bank deposits that a lot of people understand are not able to store their value, but their value constantly decreases with inflation. So this is the first part of your article again on Medium, which is around how Bitcoin is worthy of our attention because it can be an ever increasingly attractive store of value if compared to traditional currencies like the euro and the dollar. Now, before going in the energy part, but already connected with the energy part of Bitcoin mining and what it means, and then to the conclusion of your article as well. Why is the petrodollar fading? Is it the petrodollar fading? Sorry, even one step back. What is the petrodollar? Is it fading? And why is it fading?
Well, those are big questions, but in trying to summarize, money used to be backed by gold. So, if you had a banknote, you could go back at a certain point in time in history back to your bank and give the note back and withdraw gold in return. Now that gold, so-called gold standard, has over time, around 50 years, finally come to an end around in 1971, actually, where the gold standard was officially terminated, meaning that not only individuals but central banks from other countries could not redeem their banknotes for gold. Gold, which for the most part, after the Second World War, was stored, still is in part, in the United States. So the redeemability of gold has ended in 1971. So the gold standard has completely finished. And after that, there was a new system called fiat system, where the money was worth something because the government said so. That's what fiat means. And in that respect, though, money has been traditionally been backed by something for centuries. So it was difficult all of a sudden to tell people that their money, their banknotes, were not backed by anything at all. So after the gold standard ended in 1971, there was an agreement, basically, whereby the United States convinced Saudi Arabia and the Arab countries to only price oil in dollars, in US dollars. And because oil is such a pervasive, was such a pervasive and still is in part commodity, because it enters every single phase of production, because it's at the base pretty much of all economic activities, if not oil itself, but derivatives of oil or oil and gas. So because it was so pervasive and central to the economy, oil became not only a major productive input for the economy, but also a surrogate for gold, in a sense, in terms of somewhat being providing somehow some kind of backing to dollars, because oil was only payable in dollars. Dollars was perceived as being backed by oil, and that's why we call that system petrodollars.
And this is a global system, to the point where even at the time the Soviet Union, if they wanted to buy or sell oil, they wouldn't use rubles.
Exactly.
They would use dollars. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, dollars are most trades, especially commodities, but not just commodities, are traded in US dollars. So if you want to buy, it doesn't matter if Argentina is buying something from Nigeria. They'll pay. Argentina will pay Nigerian oil or whatever else in dollars. So it doesn't matter if it's not between the United States and another country. The international trade, for the most part, and still is that way, majority of that trade is priced in dollars.
So it was going very well for a given number of decades, and now it is going less well. Why is that?
It's going less well because there's a structural bug hiding, in this kind of clever arrangement. And the structural bug is that if everybody in the world pretty much has to buy things in dollars, that means that the United States, one way or another, has to provide dollars to the whole world. Otherwise, commerce would not be possible. And the way the United States historically has provided dollars to the whole world is, historically meaning in the last 50 years, has been by importing much more than they can export. They need to do that. They need to import a lot, because by importing goods and services from other countries, they provide the other countries with dollars. So they buy from other countries goods and services, they import them, and they export dollars effectively. And that's, the way that the petrodollar system has been set up, and it has worked so far. And it's not just because it's a petrodollar system. That problem is a problem that any currency issued by a single dominant country would have. That single dominant country, in this case in the US, but in any other situation, other countries would experience the same problem, that by importing more and more and exporting less and less in terms of good, they get into huge deficits, trade deficits, which also tend to become national public deficits. So we're at a point where the deficits of the United States, which are structural in this case because they had to get into debt in order to provide dollars to the world, the deficits have become so big that it's I think central banks in other countries and investors are becoming not to lose faith, because the world still has faith in the dollar, but that's exactly what we're talking about. It's faith that the U.S. will be able to keep up the system, and that faith is starting to erode. It's starting to erode because that debt is becoming more and more unsustainable. So the fear and the concern is that sooner or later that whole castle of cards is going to collapse, because the United States will not be able to make good to its debt. And
so the gold standard doesn't mean that you would go to a store and buy a ring or something. You can still do that. The gold standard meant that if everyone wanted gold, replacing their banknotes with gold, they were supposedly able to do that. And whether that was actually ever true or not in terms of the correct accounting of reserves, and if there were a universal request for gold in 1960, would that be possible? Today, what we have is the issuing of debt by the nation states, and especially the US, what we are now concentrating on. And it is this debt that is redeemable. You can sell back the debt that you bought to the issuer, and in exchange get something of value. And this something of value is a dollar itself, because you would be buying treasury bonds, and then you would be selling the treasury bonds and getting dollars in exchange, and then you would buy something with those dollars. But if you don't find a buyer, because the largest economy of the world stops buying because they bought everything they could, to the point where they are choking on so much they bought and consumed and overconsumed and overbought, the balance of trade is imbalanced, then you know that the debt is not going to be redeemable anymore. So the part of the petrodollar, because as you said, this could be something that we analyze across any number of commodities, and I don't know whether grain or corn or cotton or metals or other things are still universally or predominantly traded in dollars, but we don't talk about corn dollar, we don't talk about grain dollar, we talk about petrodollar. So the oil trade is at the basis, given that it has been in the 20th century the primary propulsive force in our ability to expand the economy. That is why we are concentrating on that. And oil, of course, is not only for filling up our cars with gas. Oil is for heating, oil is for the industries. Very importantly, oil is also for producing synthetic fertilizers, which are then used to increase the productivity of agricultural lands, and that led to our ability to feed an exploding population during the 20th century without famines that wouldn't be caused by civil war or corruption or logistics breakdown, rather than the lack of available calories. We have enough calories for feeding everyone. So is the petrodollar fading just structurally, or also the petro part is feeling some pressure?
I think the petro part, the other side of the coin, which is the oil part, the petro part of the coin, is also feeling some pressure, and the pressure meaning, it's becoming less central, let's say, to the economy of the world. Of course, it is still very central, but less so, a fair bit less than in the past, and it's becoming less and will become less and less central to the economy of the world because of a process of decarbonization that more or less every country and every business, especially large ones, but increasingly small ones as well, have embarked upon. So we have decided collectively that fossil fuels have caused, that helped us in many different ways. They are at the base of our economic development, but that economic development has come at the price of very wide damage to the environment and to climate especially, and health as well. And so we have decided collectively that we need to go through a transition, an energy transition, where we go from an oil and gas-based economy to something else, which is an economy based mainly on renewable energy and energy efficiency, because we cannot afford anymore to keep producing bad outcomes with the good outcomes. We have to try and maintain some kind of level of development, which can be still incredibly high, frankly, without all the drawbacks that oil and the harmful effects that oil has caused so far. So, and oil demand has decreased because of the pandemic. All major energy institutions like the International Energy Agency and national energy agencies are forecasting a decrease in demand for oil as other types of energy sources become more prevalent, like solar, like wind, like hydrogen, going forward. So at this point, I think we can, there'll be spikes in demand for oil, that's for sure, in the next number of years. But I think oil has started a secular decline, basically, in terms of demand.
I agree with you, except in the cause and effect. We waited as long as we could, and probably longer than we should have been, before deciding to do what we are doing now, where through policy, incentives, the adoption of renewable energy is being accelerated, but also because they are convenient. They are actually solar photovoltaics, a cheaper source of energy in an increasing number of territories than any other source. We waited as long as we could. One, because we are lazy. Two, because the incumbent interests made everything possible, from political lobbying to industrial espionage to killing people when they could and get away with it, to maintain the status quo. But the very important reason why we waited is because it wouldn't have been possible to impose an inferior solution. So whatever our aspirations were, if we were green-hearted in the 80s, let's say, and we wanted ecology to be the first priority in a given social organization, we could not impose that view because the cost of going solar and the inefficiency of going solar would have impeded it, even if we wanted to. So there is a amazing interconnected nature in this, where the secular fading, as you said, of oil is simultaneously supplemented by the availability of a superior solution, and then the policy and the incentive structures are boosting the speed of this transition even more. So let's talk about solar just a bit, solar photovoltaics, before going into Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. So go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. That's the other, we wouldn't have done it collectively if renewable energy was not cheaper. So renewable energy at this point is more convenient. It's cheaper than oil, than fossil fuels. That's true in many parts of the world, and that's why, apart from all the environmental aspects, that's why renewable energy is on the rise and fossil fuels are declining. That's absolutely at the core of this dynamic. We wouldn't have gone for solar and wind if solar and wind were much more expensive than fossil fuels. Not only they're not much more expensive, but they're cheaper. At this point, it's much cheaper to run a solar plant than a coal plant. So there is no question that it makes sense economically and it makes sense environmentally, and that's why this is happening now. There's that those two types of incentives are pairing up and are intersecting to create a different, the conditions for a different environment, economic environment as well.
And I was part of the group that designed Singularity University 12 years ago, where we eat exponentials for breakfast. And those of us who follow, those of our viewers who follow me know that I talk about exponentials or even super exponentials sometimes, all the time. And the chart that we see here is a total beautiful exponential in the installed solar energy capacity worldwide that goes and grows imperceptibly, even though it is exponential even then, and it is now really exploding with large quantities. We are talking about 500-600 gigawatt of power generation capacity installed worldwide. And it is starting to be relevant to the point that the electric grid needs to adapt and take into account this different source that has a very different nature to it. So let's stop there and talk about Bitcoin mining, what it is, and then connect the two: solar energy, the nature of the new grid that will be defined by ubiquitous solar energy generation, and Bitcoin mining in the future. So what is Bitcoin mining, and why are people told over and over again that Bitcoin is wasteful, that mining is horrible, that Bitcoin should be shut down just because, the lights on Times Square, yes, those are wonderful and extremely useful to the economy, but Bitcoin mining is something that we should never do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Bitcoin mining is at the core of the whole system, of course, and that's the way that people that call themselves miners and that use devices that themselves are called miners. That's the process they use to basically create a new block in the blockchain, and in that block there will be a whole bunch of transactions chiseled into it, so to speak. And they need to use energy because that's a tangible way, let's say, to demonstrate that whatever is included in that block, those transactions have a value, basically, and that those transactions are valid, and that the Bitcoin that is created through the validation and the creation of that block is worth something, because there has been energy spent to create it, and the energy is necessary. We need to consume energy in order to make sure that nobody else can go in there and change those blocks and change those transactions and reverse those transactions once they've been created.
So basically, the value of the immutability of the Bitcoin blockchain, the list of past transactions, as well as the value of the solution to the double spend problem, the fact that an electronic transaction that I make to you cannot be fraudulently made to another person at the same time, that the balance of the various wallets is always coherent and consistent. This value is measurable, and people are ready to pay for this feature to be available on a global basis. And if the network itself increases in value, then the value of this feature also must go up. The way that this feature is delivered on the network is through this process that unfortunately we call mining. And the reason why it is unfortunate is because, first of all, the prophet of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, did not refer to mining as this process. So it is apocryphal. It hasn't been blessed in his white paper, but also because mining as a metaphor brings with itself a lot of negative connotations. People look at it as an egotistical, greedy activity. That is why a few years ago, I actually proposed in an article I wrote for Bitcoin magazine, an alternative where I say, shouldn't we instead be using weaving, which is a communal activity? The threads of the transactions are strengthening the tapestry of the network, and the applications on top of the Bitcoin are the emerging patterns of this beautiful abstract mathematical piece of textile, and it was very appreciated and obviously completely ignored.
I think it's a brilliant idea, frankly. I like it a lot. I think it expresses, it really helps visualize what it is that is happening. Is just stitch by stitch making something wider and stronger communally. It's Bitcoin in this case is not an egotistical endeavor. It's an incredibly communal endeavor where everybody participates. And the other thing that,
so in conclusion, or rather, at this point, we can easily understand that the energy expended in strengthening the Bitcoin network is not a bug, it's a feature. It is not undesirable, it is desirable.
Absolutely.
So we shouldn't complain about it, except that, of course, in traditional ways, the Bitcoin weaving or mining activity creates undesirable CO2 emissions.
Yes.
So,
if I may just quickly, just to go back to one thing you said, why some people think that it's bad to spend all this energy in mining or in weaving. A lot of people don't realize that they make a comparison with just regular financial transactions like spending money with a credit card, without realizing that Bitcoin is not just a payment network, but is a whole settlement network. It's something that allows you basically to settle and clear and define with final certainty a transaction, whereas most other transactions in the fiat economy are not really final. They're not settled. I mean, people don't see what happens under the hood. They don't understand exactly how their plumbing works. But a credit card transaction is nowhere near the same thing as a Bitcoin transaction. There's no finality in that credit card transaction. It has to go through a whole other system where a lot of energy is spent in terms of the network, in terms of the central banks involved, in terms of all the people working for banks, in terms of the security infrastructure that goes into protecting banks, in terms of the military that goes into protecting the infrastructure, financial infrastructure. So it's really comparing apples to oranges. Whereas with Bitcoin, you do have that energy expenditure, but once you've spent it, that's it. That's your transaction is final, your money is real.
So since solar photovoltaic is the most convenient source of energy in an increasing set of regions, and Bitcoin mining facilities are driven by the profit motive, and energy is one of their largest components in their cost structure. They are very strongly incentivized in finding the cheapest energy available anywhere, which is solar, and it is becoming solar. And then there are many other components in this, of course, which is, for example, the fact that solar energy, together with batteries, constitutes a completely new kind of infrastructure. Tell us about your thinking of where this grid is going, also in terms of the price of energy, and why adding Bitcoin mining to the grid both stabilizes the grid as well as represents potential and important new source for services provided, value for services provided to the grid operators.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think the whole idea, I guess, started by recognizing that both Bitcoin and renewable energy are very similar in the sense that they're based on distributed systems. Renewable energy is by definition distributed. You have traditionally, wind and sun are available pretty much anywhere. You don't need centralized institutions to start gathering and harnessing that kind of energy. So historically, renewable energy has been decentralized, and has been decentralized in a similar way as Bitcoin has been decentralized. So they both have this at their core, this very similar feature of being decentralized. Now, with renewable energy, the decentralization is kind of a totally different system. It kind of turns the traditional energy system on its head. The traditional energy system has a few large, major energy producing plants, power plants, And from these energy producer plants, energy is channeled to homes or businesses, and that's a one-way street basically, where the energy goes only from the energy plant to your home. With renewable energy, that's kind of turned on its head in the sense that instead of having, let's say, one major energy plant providing a one-way street energy channel to homes, you have a whole bunch of smaller energy plants that can be installed on your roof as in the shape of a solar plant, and you have many producers and many consumers all channeling their own small amounts of energy into the grid. So the grid, with renewable energy becoming more and more widespread, the grid needs to change in the sense that it needs to go from being a one-way road, where energy was channeled from the power plant to the home. It needs to become like a two-way superhighway, more or less, where you have a lot of people both producing and consuming. And traditionally, the grid has not been set up and structured for that, and so it's having problems right now to accommodate all these different small, little, tiny producers putting their energy into the grid. And because the grid needs to always be balanced, we need to find ways to accommodate all these different little streams of energy getting into the grid. Now, one way of doing that, of course, is storage. Traditionally, there has been some large storage plants where you could storage the excess energy, and those storage systems have been based on a hydroelectric system. Basically, you would store the energy in the form of water in an artificial lake or something like that, and you would use the energy produced during the day where you didn't need it to pump the water upstream, and at night when everybody goes back home and turns their TVs on and and starts turning on the lights on at home, that water would just be let flow down, and in that way it was used as store energy, because the water flowing down would just power turbines that would generate energy. So that was the only way we had to store energy. But it was again large central systems that didn't work in a very flexible kind of way. With all these small, tiny producers or medium-sized producers, we need the grid to become much more flexible. And that means that the grid needs to be able to regulate, to fine-tune the flow of energy in a much more granular, precise way. And the way that's done, that can be done, it's already done that way, is by asking some people, some companies, to either consume the excess energy when there is too much, or to stop consuming energy when there is too little, so that the grid is always balanced, and nobody ideally is left without energy. Now, the way that Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining comes into the picture is that Bitcoin mining can be an ideal partner, basically, for this kind of demand response. That's how it's called. It can be an ideal partner to provide flexibility services to the grid. So the grid needs to be flexible. It's hard for the grid to be flexible on its own. It needs partners to do that. And Bitcoin mining is an ideal partner because unlike manufacturing centers, for instance, can ramp up its power or turn it down or even turn it off at a moment's notice for exactly the amount of time that is needed, for exactly the amount of power that is needed to increase or to decrease. The same thing cannot be said for, as I was saying, like larger manufacturing plants or other types of businesses that consume a lot of energy, as for instance data centers. You cannot ask a data center providing services to you and I doing this this live stream now, you can't ask them to just turn itself off for 2 hours, because that wouldn't work. Whereas
and actually, the optimization of what to do with the processing is one of the major decisions of any Bitcoin mining network. The relatively sophisticated software working in mining pools, where each miner is constantly upgrading the hardware. Something is malfunctioning, there is an internet connectivity problem, are each working for their own interest, but then collaborate relatively unwillingly, but it is their interest to collaborate, to make the network as resilient and as efficient as possible. And so, since it is driven by the profit motive, it can be the case that in an increasing interval, in an increasing number of intervals, energy prices become negative. And in that case, Bitcoin miners, rather than paying for electricity, they would be paid to take electricity. And then they will be ramping up every possible spare capacity to calculate. Or in other cases, where the grid demands a lot of power, they would be able to be paid because they are actually consuming less. So we have been having this wonderful conversation now for more than an hour, and we could keep going for a lot more, because as we said at the beginning, we are in the rabbit hole, and there's a lot to explore. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that you are familiar with Tony Seba and his work on the analysis of the future of energy systems and his various reports. I greatly recommend for our viewers rethinkx.com, his website, where all his work is available for free, applied to energy, food, transportation, and recently he released for free this wonderful Rethinking Humanity book, really high quality work. And there is a very interesting component that I would like to offer a little bit as one of the possible conclusions. A lot of people, when they talk about the economy, which is itself an expression of human knowledge and human aspirations, they look at it as a finite, closed system. When we talk about, for example, technological unemployment, oh my God, the robots are going to take our jobs. Well, only if we want it, only if we will be sitting down and doing nothing. But if our imagination and our ability to set new goals is going to require these new goals to be achieved with human contributions, then no, we will be able to strive for something. And similarly, in the world of energy, there is this fallacy that we are looking at a closed, finite system. And Tony Seba's analysis, where he says we can already in 10 years transform our current energy system in a completely 100% renewable solar, wind, and battery system. And by the way, it is just $2 trillion for the US to achieve that. But with 20% additional investment, we would be able to achieve over 300% more energy availability in 10 years. Just 20% more to be invested in energy generation, energy distribution, and energy storage, and we would have 300% more availability. And that is, to me, is incredibly inspiring, because we went from energy poverty over thousands of years to energy abundance in the 20th century. And in the 21st century, we are going to see energy superabundance. And the main reason why we escaped the mere survival level subsistence existence of all the generations that preceded us is exactly because of the abundance of energy that we were able to use. So the exercise that I would like our viewers to go home with as we end our conversation is, imagine what civilization will look like when, rather than whatever is the average power or energy available in a household in your region, let's say 1 kilowatt or 10 kilowatt, whatever it is, imagine to treble that or to quintuple that or to increase it tenfold. What kind of life can you imagine? What are the things that you would be doing, and both in your private life as well as in industry, in the services, in everything, including space exploration that we do. So, Lorenzo, what are your final remarks as we look at the next 50 years of energy and Bitcoin?
I think there can be, as you were saying, an abundant future. I think the trick, or the difficult thing rather, will be how we make the transition between now and then, which could be the next number of decades, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever that might be. I don't know. I think from a technical point of view, we have advanced a lot. We need still to do some progress in some hard to decarbonize sectors, like the sectors that use a ton of energy, a very dense energy, like metallurgy, manufacturing, that kind of stuff. But hydrogen is a very promising substitute for a lot of fossil fuel in that department, and we're not that far from being able to use fossil fuels for those hard to decarbonize, to be able to use hydrogen, for those hard to decarbonize sectors. So we're going to get there. Oftentimes just regulations and policies that separate us from being able to implement those solutions. So the regulatory aspects will be crucial. I think a lot of people will have problems making that transition because their lives depend on the old paradigm, on the old system. So we have to make sure that this transition is fair and equal, because
especially because many of those people who have an interest in maintaining humanity on the old system have guns, and they are not afraid of using their guns in order to keep us there.
I think that future is absolutely doable, is within our reach. We have to make sure that we provide solutions to the people that would suffer the most from that transition, who are the poorest people, of course, as usual. And when the economics and the incentives are aligned, which I think they're more and more aligned, it'll become like not a self-fulfilling prophecy, but something that will sell itself for the most part.
Lorenzo, this was really wonderful, and I greatly enjoyed it. We touched just the surface of so many other things that we could discuss, like why the fact that Bitcoin is a deflationary solution is actually a positive in terms of building further resilience and sustainability in the global financial system, and many other things. So thank you again for having written the wonderful article that our viewers can find on your Medium page. They should also follow your Twitter, where you will be tweeting about solar and Bitcoin in many interesting ways as well. And I will be happy to have you back. And as a matter of fact, if everything goes well, you will be back in an Italian show, unless your travel interferes. But I'm looking forward to have your confirmation in a week or two for that show to be held in April. And in the meantime, thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for inviting me. It was a real pleasure talking with you. And we just, as you said, scratched the surface. There's a lot more to talk about, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the near future. So thanks very much again.
So thanks, everybody, for watching Searching for the Question Live. I have been in the world of Bitcoin for 10 years. As a matter of fact, I put my first tweet about Bitcoin from 2011 for sale today. I said, Bitcoin P2P virtual currency. I wish you good luck and good fortune against the ire of nation states everywhere. Bitcoin.org, April 20, 2011. So why am I selling a tweet, and what does it even mean to sell a tweet? Well, we don't have the time for that. But if you go to davidorban.com/NFT, you can actually bid for that tweet. And NFT stands for non-fungible token. Basically, you will be buying an autographed, a digitally autographed version of this tweet that you can be proud of, that you can then resell to someone in another 10 years. Maybe it will be worth 10 or 1,000 times what you paid for it. It is almost guaranteed that would be the case in fiat money, right, because of inflation. And we will see in Ethereum or Bitcoin. Possibly, we will have another conversation about non-fungible tokens and why they are so popular these days in one of the future episodes of Searching for the Question Live. I would like to thank you, everyone, for having followed the show. And please support it on Patreon, going on patreon.com/David Orban. And I will be looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Searching for the Question Live.